Welcome back to another episode of ADHD Her Way. Today I'm with Marie Cameron and we are going to be talking about various topics involving autistic burnout, what the difference is between that and the boom bust cycle, and also going to be talking about anxiety versus stress. And I'm sure various other little diversions, little side quests. Yeah, so thank you for coming on today.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm really excited about the topics we've decided to chat about today.
Yeah, perfect. I know we have some shared interests in, which is not uncommon, mind you, for I do think autistic or ADHD is Schitt's Creek and various other great comedies, probably for the sake that they are just characters who probably reflect things back or we just identify with. I just like Schitt's Creek. It's been one of my favorite TV shows in a long time. And
yeah, absolutely love Schitt's Creek and so many neurodivergent coded characters in there for sure.
Yeah. I think that's probably what it is. I've had a bit of a tally in my head about the most popular shows that get mentioned when we're talking about people's special interests and preferred shows that they watch on repeat.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's natural. Like humans just tend to gravitate towards things that feel familiar. You know, same reason we end up kind of friends with similar values or political leanings or whatever. So it makes sense that we'd be drawn to those TV shows. TV and film is one of my special interests as well, especially 90s and 2000s TV.
Yeah.
And I recently started watching Gilmore Girls because I had never seen it. And I don't know why.
That's another one.
It's like prime 90s, 2000s fits the bill of what I would have loved as a teenager, but I just never watched it and I don't know why. But
yeah,
I'm watching it now and my goodness, Lorelai is so ADHD.
Yes. I love that. It's so funny. I think that's the other main one. It's that and The Office and then probably Games of Thrones. And there's maybe a couple of others, but those tend to be at the top of the list, I think, most of the time. And what is it? Parks and Recreations or Parks and Recs. That's the other one that consistently comes up.
I love that show.
Yeah. And yeah, again, the very similar characters in each of the shows. You know what? I think it just comes down to us having good humor, to be honest. And that's probably what it is. We just have a shared good humor for similar shows. Probably what it comes down to. But no, I'm just joking. I do think that there's a certain type of humor that is portrayed through there. And maybe it leans into the quotes that they use that we can repeat easily, right?
Yeah.
But I'd just love for you to introduce yourself before I go any further there. For anyone new to your work, how would you describe who you are and what you do and who you support?
Well, I'm a clinical psychologist and I'm multiply neurodivergent. So I'm neurodivergent in multiple ways, autistic, ADHD. I also have dyscalculia, which is a learning disability in math. And I'm gifted, so that makes me twice exceptional, which is like a clinical term. I'm not a huge fan of it, but basically just highlights the really vast areas, challenges and strengths. Obviously having intellectual capacity above average, but then having a learning disability in math made school really, really hard. So those are the things that I bring to inform clinical practice, other than obviously the research and everything. And I, at this point in my career, basically exclusively support autistic people and ADHDers. And I try to contribute to my community in as many ways as I can. So that means not just clinically, but I create digital resources. I do research at La Trobe University. I'm a board-approved supervisor to help upskill other psychologists in this area. So yeah,
that's
wherever
amazing.
I can.
Yeah, that's
podcasts.
So good. Yeah, fabulous. And yes, very grateful for you sharing your knowledge and it having an ability to impact others and create more self-understanding, self-identification. And as you said, living as an individual someone who's multiply neurodivergent, it's something that probably left such conflicted feelings.
Yeah,
it can really impact someone's self-esteem, I would probably guess, if they aren't really aware about what's happening.
Yeah, I think so, definitely. Particularly like a lot of my memories of school around math class were just dread and tears and never feeling like I could keep up no matter what. But then excelling in most other subjects. And so that was really confusing for me. And the messaging I got from teachers whenever I asked for help, but I didn't do that for very long, because the response was pretty consistently like, you're bright enough to understand this, so you're just not paying attention, or you're not trying, or you find math boring, so you're not applying yourself, and no one actually helping me. And so I just gave up and was like, okay, well, I just have to survive until it's not a mandatory subject anymore, which was like year 11. So it was a long time.
That's awful, isn't it? Yeah, that is far too long. And to go unsupported like that, and to be so, for things to be so misunderstood would be really challenging. And I do think that we grew up in a time where probably the supports weren't so great. Learning disability wasn't something that was diagnosed all that often, or was something that was seen in young boys. Being dyslexia was maybe known better than any others, disability in reading, writing, but others weren't really, and still aren't very easily, well picked up, I would say, even today. Or whilst I was a practicing school psych, it was something that I had a bit of a special interest in, and I was really passionate about supporting. But then also the schools push back a lot of like, well, we've got no other ways to support them. Like, we don't have the interventions to be able to show that we're running things that are, or like they couldn't really prove evidence-based strategies were happening at the school necessarily, or there's so few as well, especially for dyscalculia, that are necessarily running or even just are out there or were out there at the time.
Absolutely.
Disadvantages students. But like the twice exceptional, I guess I don't say label or identity is something that, again, is also not talked about, or giftedness is something that isn't historically been very well supported either and understood. And that, again, would also be tricky.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm very passionate about this. A lot of people out there, even in the community, even other neurodivergent people, don't really give much attention to E. And sometimes I've even heard attitudes like, sarcastically, like, oh, it must be so hard to be smart. And I understand intelligence is a privilege, and it means like we might have more elaborate masking strategies so can get by more safely than lower masking autistics. But I really didn't, despite being intelligent, I really didn't know how to mask at all, really, until I was an adult. And I went and got coaching to get through my interview to get into the clinical training program, because it's so competitive. And I was like, I don't know what it is about me, but I don't make a good first impression, and I really want to be a psychologist and I need to get in. So I went and got coaching, which to help me get through that interview and know what to say, what to do with my face. But yes, intelligence is a privilege, and the access to problem solving, like we might shut down a bit less frequently when faced with a problem. So in that sense, I understand that people might view it as a privilege, but at the same time, that also being disabled as well as highly intelligent has a completely unique set of experiences in the way that other people relate to you and support you or don't support you. There's a lot of assumptions that you can do things that you can't. So even if you've got, I could have 3 degrees and be doing a PhD, but really struggle with shutting down around making choices around what to eat for lunch or dinner, or and I have clients who have really, really high IQs who aren't high performing, so don't have a career, haven't been to university, need to live with family for 24/7 support. And a lot of people don't understand how that's possible, and it's because so much of what we do to function day to day isn't just due to intelligence.
Absolutely. And you've really hit on some important topics, because that can leave massive groups of people really unsupported or really stigmatized in our community, or really ableist assumptions made about them that is so incredibly damaging. So so much shame put on an individual, whether it's there around their capacity or performance at work, or not being able to perhaps hold down a job, or like even like you said, even go through the interview stage and apply for a job and fearing that they may be turned away for the way that they're interviewing. I hear that so frequently as well, which is heartbreaking to hear when I know as maybe a psychologist or as a peer colleague that they have so much potential and time again they get turned away for various reasons, or like ableist perspectives or whatever it may be, that they may be, could be down to not, being known as the person who may go against the grain or ruffle feathers, and it's just more convenient for them to hire someone who won't do that.
Yep.
So massive one. I've definitely found, even just remaining employed or opportunities and stuff, or even, not necessarily performance related, but also social isolation as the result of feeling misunderstood and having certain maybe sense of justice or something that you feel intellectually, whether it's, you may have experienced something similar to myself when you're going through schooling and you feel intellectually at a different level than maybe some peers, or you have such deep thoughts about existential thoughts about life, and you're just like,
that's it. It's another layer. Yeah. It's a whole nother layer of social isolation. There's, the layer of being autistic or ADHD where you're misunderstood or people think you're annoying or weird.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's this whole other layer with giftedness of no one your age wants to talk about existential or philosophical things, or they don't explore things in the depth that you do. Like if they're like, I really like this song, and you're like analyzing the lyrics and talking about all the emotions, the complex emotions that you wonder if the writer was feeling, and they're like, what? I just like the song.
Yeah.
So there's that. And then there's the whole like being bullied or teased for being a know-it-all or being condescending.
Yes.
Getting interpreted that way because if you're at school and you get excited to answer questions because you know the answer or you're really into the topic, and other kids can tell that you're intelligent and think you're a nerd or
and Australians love tall poppy syndrome, love cutting people down.
Yes. I actually grew up with this motto in my head that just became clear to me as a teenager, and from then on, it's only in recent years that I've kind of thrown it out into the garbage. But for a long chunk of my life, I would tell myself, brains are only an asset if you hide them.
Wow.
Because my experience had been that showing any kind of intelligence out of the ordinary meant I was going to be exploited or taken advantage of or ostracized.
Yeah, and that is a very sad reality for someone like yourself who would have otherwise they perhaps thrived so much more if they just felt safe to express themselves and would have maybe saved a lot of discomfort and stress, and I don't know about you, but burnout probably too. I definitely, with having to work, well, personally, I found that I was both extremes a bit. Like I probably was the deep thinker and that, but also the very, in the same, very forgetful and blanked a lot on assessments. So I almost felt like I was both extremes, where I was like really quite good. I picked things up really fast. I mean, I learned English, I think, when I moved to Australia when I was 13, and I had not spoken much of a lick of English before then. I'm originally Dutch. And so, but I was so high achiever. I was like, I must get A's from the get-go. I'm like, it seems so irrational, but I was like, I must get A's in English. And I put so much pressure on myself, and I was but then because of that anxiety about performing and then not hitting that unrealistic standard, I would tear, I would blank, I would tear up in class, and I would have all those, felt so perceived, all the faces on me when I was trying to perform, and there was kind of high expectations. I, of course, befriended the real intellects in the classroom, probably all of us neurodivergent, I would say. And so I end up kind of hanging out with, I guess, the ones that maybe identified as the nerds, but, probably held much more intellectual conversations. However, I always found myself comparing to them and their abilities. And that was always like a massive struggle for me personally, where I didn't know where to fit in. I don't feel like I fit in with the cool kids who play down their intelligence a lot. Typically, it's not very cool to be smart. So, and I was like, I don't know where I fit in. So yeah, that was always a bit tricky. And the classic floater, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I had in primary school, I grew up in a lower socioeconomic area, which now it's definitely not, which is so weird to like not be able to afford to live where I grew up. But my family immigrated from Italy in the 60s. And so I'm the first one to have gone to university.
Wow.
Yeah, I grew up with like not in a wealthy family. And so primary school, I had such diverse classmates, mostly from other immigrant families. And so I didn't have that experience or the pressure. But I do remember teachers commenting that I was high achieving. And I found that confusing because I didn't feel like I was, and I wasn't doing anything like in particular to get good grades or anything. But then in high school, again, I didn't really excel. I kind of hit I think the limit of my capability, or not capability, but I experienced more disability as I got to year 9. I just couldn't keep up with all the executive function, all the social demands, the sensory overwhelm of high school. So I really ended up splitting, like going from all A's except for math, which had never been good, to, a complete scatter. So, art and any art subjects I was getting A's in. Psychology I was getting A's in, but then pretty much everything else was like C's or D's because I just couldn't keep up with it. So I ended up, like you said, I took a hit to the self-esteem because I'd always had such positive feedback about being a good student. I experienced bullying in primary school and in high school. So I was like, well, I'm not cool, so I might as well lean into being smart. But then I didn't feel smart anyway by the time I got to year 9. Yeah, so I was like, well, what the hell am I then? So I just aligned myself with the other outcasts at school. So just anyone else who was like ostracized or, whatever, and just tried to survive.
Yeah. Yes, not many happy memes for myself either from high school or primary school. And I do hear that's a very common narrative, unfortunately. I think things are seeming to be changing, but not necessarily positively for everyone. So I don't want to, I guess, make that judgment. But it does seem like there's at least more understanding, more supports in place for some, or like this, people finding that they can advocate slightly better. Maybe that could be a generalization, but it certainly doesn't seem as problematic as it was when I was going through schooling, which I'm glad about. But there's still so much more to do. I mean, we do know about school can't, and I know you've talked about that and been on podcasts to talk about that and burnout post school meltdowns, and that now identify as that being that, as well myself. But even, during university, same kind of deal, that, or like I just held it together and I'm burnt out, massive, like catastrophically burnt out after uni, or like in between uni, like between degrees, and to the point where, I've now got a lifelong wheat allergy, which is just great. It's also in other ways disabling and probably inflamed every other chronic health condition that I haven't even diagnosed yet, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I think, again, those things that you don't even consider, but probably end up being part of a lot of individuals' experience because of all the years, many decades having held together. Imagine if we'd been differently supported, how our bodies may have been in a very different health state too. Yeah. And not just mental health, even physical health. I think many of our colleagues and ourselves, experience chronic health conditions, and our clients. And so I find that really common thing for people to navigate, and people now starting to better diagnose, or be better diagnosed. Would you mind just telling me a little bit more about, you've shared a little bit about your experience, and when did you actually become more curious about that? Was it that you became also more understanding of your neurotype around as you were maybe when you were a teenager? Was it even before that you started noticing that maybe your brain was potentially wired differently? Or was it not till much later when you started studying psychology that really everything started to kind of make sense? What was that like for you personally?
It's been such an interesting journey. From a very young age, I would say like maybe 5 or 6 years old, I definitely clocked that I was different to other kids just because I didn't seem to gel with them as easily as they seemed to.
Yeah.
Like when I would go to play with other kids. I was socially motivated as a kid. Like I wanted to make friends and play with other kids, but I just didn't seem to gel when I tried. And of course, the topics that I thought were interesting to talk about, usually they weren't interested in talking about. So, or the things that I thought were fun to do, like, you know, let's go find insects or bugs and like inspect them and see what wing patterns they have. You know, is way cooler than the sand pit. This would have been in like prep, like my first year of primary school. So there was that. But I think in terms of actually like autism, I started to think I could be autistic when I was probably 13. 14, around about there. It would have been in year 8. And it's because I had a special interest in psychology and psychiatry. So I had been reading the DSM at the library.
How just very regular of you to go and do that.
I know. So I was... Yeah. So the more I read about Asperger's, it really intrigued me because I was like, so much of this feels really, really relatable. But I guess what kind of threw me off considering it seriously was when I went to read more about it in encyclopedias at the time, but also a bit, there was the internet. It wasn't Google back then though. And I just kept reading about like this lack of empathy. And that's what really threw me because I was like, that one doesn't track. But the rest do. So that, threw me a bit. And I raised it a few times with like the school psychologist around the time I was 15. And then another psychologist when I was maybe like 18 and again in my early 20s. And it just got completely shut down every time. Like there's no way you're on the spectrum. ADHD never occurred to me, which is pretty funny, like considering how hyperactive I am. But that one just did not occur to me until I was working as a psychologist and then working with autistic kids. Obviously there's a lot of co-occurring ADHD. And I was like, oh, that looks familiar. Like that rings a bell. So that's when I thought.
What was it that stood out for you? Was it more the restless brain, like just that you just had really a hyperactive brain that just was really hard to shut off at nighttime, especially?
Yeah, and physically hyperactive. So like kids that are just struggling to stay in their seats or like really squirmy. And I just was like, yeah, man, that was so hard for me in class. I used to get told to stay still all the time. But also just my nickname growing up from not even a nickname, my mum would use the phrase all the time, she's off with the fairies.
Yeah.
Just because I zone out all the time. I get lost in my own thoughts. Yeah.
And it was something that's so interesting that was normalized so much, or like that wasn't something that was seen as, which technically, like, you know, it's also great if we can let people just sit in their imagination, if it's not because they're so distressed or so bored that they're going there. But if it's actually quite harmless, perhaps we may need to let people use their imagination and maybe can be channeled well. But it's interesting that, usually that the inattentive type, or that's how, if it presents herself with the fairies or she struggles with focusing. For me, it was she's quite chatty, she's really, really chatty. She's quite social, loves a good chat. Everywhere it says, if she only stopped chatting and actually focused on her work, something along those lines, which
I heard
probably
that too.
is more socially, I guess, normative, like that's more kind of socially acceptable ways of displaying it, whereas for boys potentially it would be much more disruptive than that perhaps, or may have been the kind of quote unquote problem behaviors that therefore gets more attention and then gets followed up differently or earlier, whereas for many women, not all, but again maybe the high masking type, that or that just overshadowing of the autistic and ADHD traits that just went under the radar.
Yeah, absolutely. I think ADHD can can do that, overshadow some social autistic traits for sure.
Yeah. I always say this to clients as well, like people, like, oh, well, out of curiosity, were you the type that was, considered someone, not necessarily a teacher's pet, but one to quickly jump up and help out if there was jobs to be done? Were you usually the one either assigned to those jobs, or did you go looking for them and make sure that everyone's sorted for their pencils and the sharpening? Like the amount of excuses I make to get up and walk around in hindsight, which is pretty funny.
Absolutely. And also just I really enjoyed the predictability of being given jobs. So true. Now I don't have to do unstructured social chit chat. So that more autistic side of it for me, where it was like, if you tell me to do a task, I know exactly what is expected of me now.
Yeah,
and less stressful.
That's right. And might have also lent a bit into some of the, maybe conditioned people-pleasing tendencies of then feeling like you're helping, and also met that need maybe, or like not met the need, but like, perhaps got a bit of the socializing but also made you seem really helpful. And if you felt you were struggling in other areas, that is something that I certainly found that meant I felt really, I don't say useful, but I felt I had something to contribute when I felt maybe silly in other places, or I didn't feel like I was meeting my potential. But I'm like, well, and being rewarded as, that good girl, being like, oh, you're so kind, you're so thoughtful. Bloody hell. Like now it's really bit me in the backside. Like I wish at times I wasn't so bloody thoughtful.
It takes a long time to unlearn that.
Yeah, exactly. But thank you for sharing your insights. That's so helpful. I think really validating for others to hear, and especially coming from professionals. I know that you've only not too long ago begun sharing a bit more about your lived experience, but I do think that is invaluable. Since people have been sharing about it more, whether it's professionals, others with lived experience, and have therefore made this whole topic so much more acceptable to discuss, and taking all the shame out of it, less ableist takes, and even more evidence-based information through the sharing of lived experience too, I think can be great, or linking of the two. So I do thank you for sharing that, because I do think that often the gold is in those things. Like, as we know, the DSM-5, it has a long way to go in terms of, it's the best we have at the moment in terms of diagnosis. But I just also want to remind people that they can self-identify, and if they are listening to this and would like to explore it, they obviously can. But yes, there's so much value in even self-identifying. We know from evidence that there's massive gaps there, and there's privilege in being, having access to supports and that, and getting formally diagnosed. But so that is a shame. And
absolutely, I'm only formally diagnosed because I am a working professional. Like I couldn't get assessed until I was 30 because I couldn't afford it. As like when I was younger or in high school or whatever, my family definitely couldn't afford it. And then when I was at university, I definitely couldn't afford it. So I was very poor.
Yeah.
So, struggling just to live. So I feel very privileged to be able to have accessed that. So I am also a big advocate for self-identification for that reason as well. Until it's accessible for everyone to have an assessment, I think, we should, not gatekeep that.
Yeah, absolutely. Something else that I know you're very passionate talking about is the difference between stress and anxiety. What's the main difference between stress and anxiety, especially when it comes to neurodivergent individuals?
So I have a free resource on this that I'll give you the link to for your episode notes. But I am passionate about this because I think a lot of the time autistic people or people with ADHD as well get diagnosed with like generalized anxiety disorder, when I would argue that they don't have it and they don't meet criteria for it. Some do. Obviously, you can have both. But so I think it comes down to a bias of the mental health professional in what they're deeming is like irrational worry. And I think that's really subjective.
Yes.
So
true.
So to kind of go back a bit and give people context to know what I'm saying, anxiety is usually worry. So it's cognitive. It happens in our mind where we're worried something is going to happen. We're anticipating, and we're usually anticipating something that it's either like not quite rational or our brain has made it bigger than the threat actually is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an important distinction, because I think autistic and ADHD people do worry about things, but I would argue that some of the things they worry about are completely in proportion, and the threat is real. And so I think that's an important distinction. And so when our system, our nervous system, is responding to demands that we don't have the resources to meet, that's stress. And stress is a very physiological experience. And so ways that stress kind of manifests in the body is feeling constantly exhausted or like unable to relax. So that wired but tired feeling. Digestive issues or headaches, pain in the body, shutting down more often, melting down more often, being irritable, and difficulty sleeping. So all of those physiological experiences, they're stress, and that's because we don't have the resources, whether internal or external, to meet the demands that are currently being placed on us. The human body is not meant to be in a state of chronic stress. We haven't evolved to be able to handle that.
Yeah.
And so what happens is you see a whole bunch of negative consequences on mental health and on physical health. Yeah. So anything from weight loss or sleep deprivation to more extreme things like prolonged stress over a long period of time, has been shown to change the way our body deals with DNA. And so we can have changes in our DNA that lead to chronic health conditions or like cancers. And
yes. And that's so important to point out. And I'm glad that you brought that to our attention, because again, people may otherwise feel that there's something innately wrong with them, that they just have this pervasive anxiety that they, should just be masking basically with medication, and they just have to almost suffer through it. Like for certain people, certainly there may be conditions under which you can't necessarily in the immediate change certain environments or certain aspects to your life. That means that accessing medication for an anxiety disorder or antidepressants for depression may be something that is helping you out of a place, or giving you the tools, get the right supports in place that are genuinely helping your potential autistic ADHD brain. And I guess to personally take medication. However, it is something that, I think is still really poorly understood, even amongst health professionals, especially if there's other undiagnosed disability there that's completely dismissed perhaps, or just not explored. And that's hugely problematic.
Yeah. Well, actually, the national guideline, the ADPA guideline on ADHD, has a section on medication choice.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I love that, because even though we can't advise on medication as psychologists, what I can do is give my clients that information and empower them to ask questions.
Yes, I've done that.
Yeah. So in the guideline, it clearly says if someone has an anxiety disorder, you still go with the first line treatment, which is stimulants for ADHD.
Yeah.
But so many psychiatrists or pediatricians are hesitant to prescribe stimulants if someone's anxious, because they think it'll make it worse.
Yeah.
Of course, everyone's different, but my observation of my clients is when given stimulants, and which supports their executive function, it alleviates the chronic stress. Yeah. Because now they can keep on top of things, and it doesn't have that domino compounding effect. And in fact, they don't even need anxiety medication at all once the ADHD is well supported.
Yeah.
But of course, everyone's different. So I think, it's really important. And I think a lot of people do get just easily put on, even by their GPs, on an SSRI.
Yep.
To
it's
help,
crazy.
Yeah. So I don't know, a long way to go with medication, I think.
Yeah. And that's the same goes, like we haven't touched on it necessarily, but for postpartum, that's what I do find as well, working in a perinatal mental health space too, is that it's almost even more likely. And we do know that there can be specific times in one's life that hormones are especially, I guess, out of balance, and potentially like it could be the most effective in the short term for like genuine depressive episode or like high anxiety. However,
absolutely.
I guess it does still need to be considered that is there something else that's going on for that to have been brought about? And for someone to experience such, whether it's psychosis, I wouldn't say necessarily super common, but it's common enough, birth trauma. And so, are we going to explore what else could be going on for that individual? For instance, birth to have been so traumatic, I've definitely noticed that if there's conversation around, I didn't feel supported or felt really misunderstood in my care, and I'm like, that already gets me like kind of a little bit interested. I'm like, okay, is this a pattern? Is this something that is not just during birth? Yes, it could be very situational, but I do find there's also a massive pattern too for neurodivergent individuals or undiagnosed ADHD and autistic individuals to experience more difficulties or challenges, both being supported, being listened to, but then also leading to outcomes like birth trauma and postpartum anxiety and depression as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't imagine, like, I'm actually pregnant at the moment.
Okay, congratulations.
Thanks. But I can't imagine not knowing I'm autistic and going through this. The first trimester was horrible. I hadn't heard anything about that in anything I'd read about that being a really difficult time. So I was expecting to have a breeze until the third trimester. And it was brutal.
Not unicorn, no.
No. And I often think about like all these social rules, like don't tell anyone you're pregnant until you're 12 weeks. And I'm like, those first 12 weeks are the worst. What do you mean? Where's your support?
Yeah, it's terrible, isn't it? Yeah, it's really, so were you feel like, you don't have to share if you don't want to, but was it that you were also feeling quite ill? Were you feeling really nauseous?
I was so ill. I haven't done a deep dive, but I have seen some research on that autistic and ADHD women tend to be more sensitive to hormone shifts. And that's certainly true for me. Even in my usual cycle, there's a week in the month there where my appetite is non-existent and my sensory stuff is worse.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did. I had really severe nausea and just fatigue. Like couldn't function really. For 3 months.
Well, hopefully the rest of the journey is, more positive. I think typically the second trimester is better for many, and then the third it's more around discomfort and reflux, I think is a big one as well. That I found Rennie's helped a lot. But yeah, hopefully, and you can ask for the support team and that to be around you.
Yeah, I've just heard so many, as you would with clients who've been through birth who are autistic, ADHD, and have chronic health conditions. There's so much birth trauma that honestly could have been prevented if the providers took the condition seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if there was queries around it that they, but just providing neurodiversity affirming care, just full stop. I'm on a research team at the moment with Monash Uni actually, and we're looking at supporting women in perinatal care in a more neuroaffirming way. We're looking at the research first of all, and then they want to maybe take the project further. So yes, it's an interesting space, and I'm like, gosh, I've got so many different like areas of interest and stuff, but it's definitely one that is really close to my heart too, because I was really fortunate to have been through the birth centre. I don't know how that came about. I kind of knew that's what I wanted. My mum was I do know how important it is that women are cared for appropriately, well, throughout their entire life, really. But yeah, especially around such a vulnerable time. And yeah, for me personally, it was like HEDS or EDS wasn't something that was well supported at all. Both times I struggled so much and didn't even realize till probably toward the end, I started to question it myself or looked it up, and I was like, that pelvic girdle pain that's supposedly really normal is something that is like a whole different level for me. And I felt so disabled by it that I almost couldn't walk. I was like, should I be getting a wheelchair? But I had lots of people around me be like, oh, you look so, comfortable. All you need to do is just take it a bit easy. I'm like, no, I don't think you understand what I'm talking about.
No.
Like, I can't really move very well at all anymore. You may have also mentioned that already around the shame of like, well, I should be loving this process. I should be enjoying pregnancy. For a lot of women, they say like, I felt so guilty. Everything seemed fine, or just feeling, like the birth experience wasn't what they want, or pregnancy wasn't what they expected?
Yeah, absolutely. I've always wanted to be a mother, but I didn't really ever have any thoughts about pregnancy. So I think I'm lucky in the sense that I didn't have any expectations that are that are being like trashed or anything.
Yeah.
I'm pretty like neutral about it, but I am finding it frustrating that people are kind of talking a lot to me about the beauty of pregnancy and like the magic of pregnancy, and I'm like, it's awful. I'm doing it because I have to, because I want to meet my child. Like, if I could skip this bit, I would.
Yes. Yeah. And I think similarly, some people experience like really behave ADHD and autistic babies not yet diagnosed that are really sensitive little bubs that are not the best of sleepers or quite horrific and have maybe more sensitive to their environment and changes. That was my experience. I felt so much like, oh man, I should be loving this experience, and this is actually just freaking tough. And why am I struggling so much more than other people? I'm not loving it as much. This whole breastfeeding experience isn't what I envisioned it. Like, don't get me wrong, like I still would do it all over again. However, with the now self-compassion I have now, and I think that's so key. But gosh, that again wasn't something that I understood properly, was properly supported at the time, unfortunately. Just bring it back to your point, that was a roundabout way. That's the stress we put under because of those neuronormative expectations of a birthing mother and whatever.
Yeah. And I can't think of anything worse, than if you've got a newborn, your body's recovering from like an exceptional thing that you've just done. Like the wound that you're recovering from is huge, and physical exertion and all of that. And being autistic, then having to deal with social demands, like people wanting to see you all the time and meet the baby and touch the baby. And are they vaccinated? How do you put boundaries in place? Like, it's just, I'm already feeling apprehensive about it and thinking about ways to navigate that ahead of time.
Yeah, and some are already in a position of being immunocompromised or are worried about their childhood maybe. So I think those are real considerations. And who may not be growing up in the most, in families where boundaries are respected all that much as well, in certain households where they may have experienced quite traumatic upbringing as well. So there's lots and lots of things. But if also at the same time, I do think that autistic and ADHD mothers can be some of the most loving and have such deep connections with their children and make amazing mothers. And it's a shame that they, again, don't always hit the potential, that or don't feel like they are the mother they wish they could be. Yeah. And I do think that that's a really important thing to remember, that you are probably far more equipped than maybe what you're getting told you are, and that that it's important to stay true to that. You don't have to say you love every part of it. That's okay. I've really enjoyed the conversation, and it's so nice to hear that you're in this position, and it's been really lovely actually to, even just for my own soul, to be like kind of reparenting in a way, to be like, I can give that to somebody else to like have such a different experience.
Yeah, that's what we're the most excited about as well.
Would you be able to just give some key descriptors or differences between also that boom bust cycle and what is autistic burnout, and potentially versus anxiety that you mentioned before?
I think about it like occupational burnout, which is just the standard, like when people talk about burnout at work, that's usually what they're talking about. People of any neurotype can experience that, autistic, ADHD, neurotypical. And that's when people all of a sudden like don't have capacity for their work anymore. But usually they still have capacity outside of work. So they can still be social, still do all the things that they love. It's just they've really hit their threshold for work. And that's pretty common in lots of occupations. I would say ADHD people can experience that a lot, especially if they boom early in the job. And so that's different to boom bust, which I see more in ADHDers, I see more in ADHDers, and in people with chronic health conditions. And so that's when we have like a boom in productivity, or like getting a lot of things done in a short amount of time. And then you just burn out. But it's usually temporary. I mean, it's all temporary, but it's not a very long time. It's usually, people then like have a period of rest and bounce back. And then they're like, great, I've got all my energy again. And then the cycle repeats.
Yeah.
And bust and boom and bust.
Yeah.
How autistic burnout is different though is that it's really prolonged. So, you know, at least a few weeks where even rest doesn't like fix it. It does eventually, but it's not like you just need a day or two off and then you bounce back. It's usually quite extended. And it comes with things like a loss of skills that you usually have that are usually not very hard for you to do. So all of a sudden it might be like you're struggling to shower every day, or brush your teeth every day, maybe answering phone calls, you just can't, or texting people back, you know, all of a sudden that falls apart.
Stop eating, drinking.
Yep. Struggling with, eating, either because the appetite is so disrupted or you just don't have the capacity to prepare food. And there's usually increased sensory differences. So even though as autistic people we have sensory differences already, those are usually heightened even more when in burnout. Some people just have a general sense of feeling like they're just not themselves. And so as I'm saying this out loud, you can hear how that sounds like depression.
Yes.
And it does get misdiagnosed as depression. So I would say a real key difference is there's not necessarily feelings of like a deep sadness or hopelessness that you see in depression here. And people might still really enjoy their interests and engaging with their interests. They just may not have the capacity to do them. So, but if they can, then they still enjoy it and they still have that experience of enjoyment. And I think that really differentiates it from depression.
Yeah.
But there's a bunch of research now that shows that burnout can lead to depression.
Yeah, makes sense.
Which makes sense. Yeah, because some people feel really hopeless, like it's never going to go away or they can't work. And so they feel like they're not contributing or impacts their self-esteem or they have a lot of shame.
Yeah.
So it can certainly lead to depression. But I think that basically, right now, based on research, autistic burnout is unique to autistic people, although I am seeing a lot of ADHDers online talk about burnout. And so I don't know, I think my opinion will change as we learn more through research, but based on what I observe in clients and on the research at the moment, I don't typically see ADHDers experience like burnout, full burnout, like autistic burnout, unless they're autistic.
Yes.
I see more of the boom bust. So
yes.
They can bounce back from it like with some downtime and then keep going through that cycle. And the last bit of your question, ADHD, how does that differ? I think the interplay between ADHD and autism is sometimes trickier because ADHD, particularly if there's that impulsivity or like excitableness and wanting to say yes to lots of things and not planning ahead for like capacity, I think that can lead to a boom bust, but at some point the bust extends into autistic burnout. So yeah.
Yes, that feels very resonant for me personally, and it's probably what as I've also grown to understand that concept better, I've been able to, I've done my best to keep bringing it back to that as what it's about in terms of when people bring that to me, and I kind of query them around what their adaptive functioning may be like, and to explore like, is there something a bit more going on? So yes, I do find that that's now something that I've come to understand, especially for those hyperactive impulsive, like two extremes where it can be, the high highs, low lows. And also something that I notice is something that tracks along especially for those who also experience PMDD disorder, I find that it tracks their menstrual cycles quite frequently.
Yes.
So it does kind of really look like that actual cycle. Personally, I really have now become better at space, really energy accounting and things like that. It does make a massive difference in my in the traits and my experiences.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm really sensitive to hormones as well. And I notice when I have a spike in estrogen, like right in the middle of the cycle there, I'm so productive.
Yeah.
I take on way too much.
Yep.
And then pay for it later.
Yes, absolutely.
2 weeks later, actually.
Yeah, coincidentally. Yes. So yeah, that's me in about 2 weeks time, I think, roughly. Yeah. So definitely it's something I noticed too. And then forced recovery is that period when the RSD kicks in and you feel, you beat yourself up. I do notice that the PMDD traits are typically heightened because someone's gone too hard and then have that backlash or like that feeling like I can't do anything. And so it is probably good to keeping a bit of a hormone track and notice different capacity each day. But I do think that spoon theory model helps us a lot to be able to track our energy levels.
Yeah, tracking my hormone cycles was really cool. Like I learned so much. And so I got to a point where I started in my actual diary, like my schedule, because I'm a very visual person, I need it and I color code it. I started putting in my diary. I'm lucky to have had very clockwork cycles, so I could predict, but I would say in my diary, in this week, if you can, do some report writing because you're going to be pretty productive. In this week, try not to schedule too many cognitively demanding things because it's luteal phase and your executive function is going to be really bad. So
yes, and medication, I find stimulants don't work as well at that time of the month.
They don't. Yeah,
so
not
that's
for me
another
either.
thing. Yeah. And that might be another reason why to be easier on, it's not easier, but more understanding on yourself and not to overschedule, especially then. And that I do notice makes for a far more quote unquote productive month when you do manage to schedule it in a way, have fun activities or things that you need at different times of the month that might be more important to pay attention to than what you have been. So thank you so much for that helpful conversation. Now, I really like to just finish on something that is about giving us hope right now about the future of work, diagnosis, support, and acceptance. What do you feel is something that you're hopeful for?
I think that it's easy to lose hope. Especially at this point in time. Like we're just bombarded constantly with really awful things in the media and in the news happening around the world. And then, you've got what's going on in America with like all these claims about ridiculous causes of autism and whatever. Yes. And, the NDIS is a bit of a shit show at the moment. So I think it's really easy for us to get to feel like disenfranchised. And like, I think there's a lot of collective trauma as well in our community. But I do genuinely feel a lot of hope for the future. And for so many reasons. But the ones that really stand out to me is I think about the fact that we have books now for kids and for adults about autism and ADHD that just didn't exist when I was growing up. Or, if they did, they were very clinical focused and so pathologizing. We have more representation on TV and in media. Like we've always had that anyway. It just wasn't explicitly stated. I could give you so many movies and TV shows with autistic and ADHD characters in them. But now we have actual characters that are labeled. We've got Chloe Hayden on Heartbreak High as Quinny being autistic. And, there's a great show for young people on ABC called A Kind of Spark that's about two autistic sisters going through school. It's a really great show. Like, so we have more representation now. And the fact that we have the term neurodiversity affirming is something that is getting spoken about and is out there and is in government documents. Like that gives me hope.
Yeah.
But lastly, the one that gives me probably the most hope, because I see it so often, the generations that are coming up. Like the clients that I have who are in primary school will come into sessions and talk about like their internal experience with so much insight and understanding into what they need, what the barriers are in their day-to-day that's preventing them from, doing what they need to do. And they're quite good at being assertive, like I've had some of my clients come in and say that they got in trouble at school because they asked to go get some fresh air to regulate themselves. And the teacher said no, for example. And then they were like, well, I'm not really asking you for permission. Like, it's a need and it needs to happen or I'm going to have a meltdown. And then they get in trouble for like talking back. They're just like, that teacher didn't get it, Marie. And I'm like, this is great.
That's so good.
And how many parents now are learning more about this and are a lot more attuned with their autistic children. That's the stuff I think that we're breaking intergenerational patterns of trauma.
Yeah.
It's going to be slow, but it's happening.
Yeah.
So that gives me hope.
Yes, absolutely. And brilliant minds in workforces and supported appropriately, even being recruited for their talents and something that I think is done more so now than ever before. Yeah, we can be grateful for those things because otherwise we lose complete sense of hope and that. So I do think it's always important to come back to, well, what is happening that is making a difference. So thank you very much for talking to that. So just for some quick fire, I am curious, what Taylor Swift song sums up your current season of life?
Oh,
so it's a big one. It's okay. You can pick your favorite one if it's...
Yeah. No, that's okay. I think, honestly, 2 off her current album. It's interesting because we were both born in 1989 and have hit certain milestones at the exact same time, which is a bit freaky.
That is a bit freaky. You do give me off Taylor Swift vibes a lot.
And so I think Wish List, where she talks about just not really being interested in any material things, but just wanting a peaceful life with her fiance and to start a family. So I really resonate with that one.
Yeah.
And Eldest Daughter, which I know gets mixed opinions, but
I loved it.
I love it. I think it depends where you're at in your healing journey as an eldest daughter.
Yeah.
But for those of us who are well and truly on the road to healing, I think shedding that whole thing of like having to be overly responsible for everyone and not trying to fit in anymore or be cool. Yeah.
Absolutely. Love that answer. David, Alexis, or Moira, who do you relate to most and why?
Alex. Oh, wait. Hang on. That's really hard. All right. Well, it's definitely not Moira. I don't really relate to Moira at all, really. I find her so entertaining, though, and I love her vocabulary.
Awfully entertaining.
Love her as a character. I would say I'm a bit of a mishmash of Alexis and David. Like my disorganizedness in my immediate surroundings is very Alexis. But I probably relate most to David. There's just so many things, like his literal language and taking people on face value all the time. And I really resonate.
Yeah, and a complete intolerance of certain behaviors and openly, just unmasked, just telling it how it is.
Yeah, that's it. And there's just so many moments where I watch that show and I'm like, oh man, that's so relatable. Yeah,
and the sarcasm does it for me. Love it. Current hyperfixation that you'd happily talk about for an hour. There's probably so many.
It's always autism.
Yeah.
I mean, as demonstrated in this episode. But I could also talk about Taylor Swift for ages, and not just her as a person, but her art and her writing style. I don't know if many people are aware of this, but so many literary references in her work. Like, she's obviously incredibly well read.
Yes.
And
the English teacher.
Yeah, there's just an elaborate weaving of worlds across her albums, and I just love that. So you can listen to it on the surface level, or you can start connecting things and putting pieces together. She's done that
very well. Okay, what brings you pure autistic joy right now? Anything other than what you've already mentioned?
Right now, all I can think of is foods because I'm pregnant. So there's certain foods that I just, like Weet-Bix. I'm very into Weet-Bix right now.
I think maybe it started when I was pregnant. It's still going strong. Weet-Bix every morning. Mind you, it was
every morning, the whole time I've been pregnant, every single morning. I love my Weet-Bix and white nectarines at the moment.
They are delicious too.
Yeah, so those are bringing me burritos, just lots of foods. I've been delighted actually in that a lot of my sensory sensitivities have been reduced since being pregnant, which I know is not very common.
No, that's amazing. So interesting. Maybe it's seeking out more salty foods as well, perhaps. Do you feel that? Or
Oh, definitely. I usually don't like salty things, but I've been seeking more salty things. Yeah.
But also pots, yeah. Most underrated hack that actually keeps you organized at work. This is the last one.
Yeah. So this is going to upset so many people, but literally keeping a diary. Like, I know we're so sick of being told, like, keep a schedule, but honestly, I could not function without it. But the other one is I use a project management software, but for my life.
Smart. Which one is the one that you use for your life?
I use Asana, and it just means I can create a project for different aspects of my life. So I can do like clinical research, private life, pregnancy, and within each of those have to-do lists and tasks. And it helps so much with the executive function, because whenever I do anything to do with that, I go and put the information all in the one place. And so anytime I need anything, I can be like, it's in Asana. But you have to have I've got the executive, like everyone's executive function profile is different, and planning for me is okay. And so I do actually remember to put things in there, which I know a lot of people with ADHD struggle with that. So I'm grateful that I can do that.
It's a bit hit and miss. Mine's Notion, similar, but a bit hit and miss. And when I do, it's that hyperfixate, like I do it all or nothing.
Yeah.
But I'm going to get better at it. I'm sure accountability really helps for me. So if I've got someone who's in there as well, I'm much better at actually completing it too.
Oh, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. Now, we've come to the end of the interview, and it's honestly been a joy. Can you please tell people where they can find you? I will make sure to put all the links that you've mentioned below.
So you can find me at mariecameron.com, and you can find me on Instagram, which is just at Marie Cameron. And my website has digital resources, as I mentioned. There's ones that are free and there's ones that you have to pay for.
Now, thank you so much for coming on. All the best with the rest of your pregnancy, and have a wonderful day.
Thanks.